Well, it's 30 degrees here in England, so if you'll excuse the perspiration. Anyone familiar with the Lady of the Labyrinth YouTube channel will know a bit about Maria Kilvorg's work. She is an expert on Norse mythology and interpreting Norse myth. She studied in Norway, where she's from. In her first dissertation, The Lady with the Mead, Kilvorg argued that initiation rituals were evident from the thematic structure of Eddic poetry. It's been normal for scholars who are studying this area of history to take a skeptical and critical view of the literary sources, mostly coming from Iceland in the 13th century. Well, in earlier historians in the 19th century and the 18th century were far more willing to take the sources such as the Eddic, the Prose Edda and the Poetic Edda, and various sagas, many by Snorri Sturluson. They were taken literally or thought to be very reliable anyway, with little questionable content. That sort of confidence in the reliability of these sources has been eroding over the course of the 20th century. Since her dissertation, she's been arguing that the Eddas reveal a complex mythology with many layers of symbolism, and she read this complexity into it as a result of her studies of Hinduism as an undergraduate. Kilvorg analyses the sagas and the Eddic sources from the perspective of an expert on religion and presumes them to be a reliable document of this religion. My personal opinion is that there is a great deal to learn from these Eddic sources, and that to take them too lightly as being the work of a Christian making propaganda is being too cautious, because Snorri Sturluson was keen to record details of their ancestry, which was still, after conversion, an important aspect of Northern society, Nordic society. Many Icelanders today can trace their lineage right back to the characters of the sagas. There are certainly limits to how much you can rely on his information. The Snorri Sturluson's edits, as well as Heimskringla, which this is the latest translation, if you're looking for one, do depict something useful about understanding the mythology of Nordic peoples and Scandinavians of the Viking Age. The seed of Yggdrasil is very dependent on etymology and philology to make the arguments that it puts forward. Maria Kilvorg contradicts received wisdom on certain translations. Her interpretation of Nordic myth relies on a very heavy emphasis on the meaning of names and the fact that these names themselves reveal a great deal about the symbolic role of certain characters within sagas and myths. I'm not a philologist or an etymologist, so I can't double check, or really argue with Maria on any of the claims she makes regarding etymology and translation. Her approach is certainly not orthodox in conventional historical research of Norse mythology. Maria Kilvorg is a trained historian, but she writes with the bias of someone who has some sympathy for the heathen perspectives, more so than she does for the Christian perspectives of the people who wrote these mythologies down. She herself makes it clear that she does not literally believe in Nordic gods or in the cosmology or mythology depicted in this Snorri Sturluson's and other Icelandic literature. Her writing reveals her sympathies for a pantheist perspective that legitimizes Icelandic literature from the 13th century as providing a means of understanding the complicated cosmology and mythology of the pre-Christian Nordic religion. And I suspect that she herself holds some kind of pantheist view of the universe, which may or may not colour her approach to the subject. This is not to say that this is not a reliable work by any means. It's very thoroughly researched and very long. I must confess that as yet I've only read the first 200 pages, and there are some 677 pages to get through. So it's certainly a thorough piece of work. Much of it is taken from her YouTube videos, which you can watch on her channel, where she has fascinating theories that she's given some serious thought and a lot of study in. But she always begins with the presumption that there is some deep meaning and symbolic layers to the stories. She is willing to make much more daring observations, which combined with her extensive knowledge seem to unearth previously unconsidered meanings to the old stories. I draw the line at some of her assertions and speculations as being rather too far-fetched. For example, she talks a little bit about Thor and his belt of power that he wears, and his being a thunder god associated with lightning, as being somehow evidence that pre-Christian Nordic people were aware of the workings of electrical circuitry. There's a lengthy explanation for this which I haven't done justice, but I will say that I don't find that convincing at all. Although I'm not certain that this book would be considered reliable if you wanted to use it for academic purposes as a source. I absolutely believe that Maria has, from her original approach to Norse mythology, stumbled upon some quite revolutionary concepts and meanings to these mythologies were previously denigrated as being quite simplistic, or simply being degenerated versions of much older stories. She makes good arguments for the complexity of these stories, and that there was a great deal more at work than has previously been assumed by scholars of the late 20th century and early 21st century. The book is filled with her own illustrations of rock carvings from Neolithic Scandinavia. Excuse me, very hot actually. It's a bit too much to gather my thoughts at the moment. The discovery of the ritual structure of the myths and the detailed accounts of the various stages of the ritual experience strongly suggests that the myths do in fact reflect pagan religious practices. The book is lengthy and technical, and it does presume some knowledge of the text that it deals with, although the quotations are in there, so a beginner could pick this up and certainly enjoy it and learn a lot from it. But Seed of Yggdrasil, published by White Tracks, very insightful, fascinating theories, definitely worth a read if you're interested in the subject of Norse mythology. And also take a look at some of her videos on the Lady of the Labyrinth channel. Another thing that you should take a look at if you're interested in that kind of thing is my soon-to-be released documentary film on the subject of Anglo-Saxon paganism. In the documentary I'll be looking at various parts of the English landscape and their relationship to Anglo-Saxon paganism. I'll also be interviewing all kinds of interesting people whose way of life somehow reflects that long-gone era of Anglo-Saxon paganism. Here are a couple of clips from it to finish off with.